Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're analyzing a story that starts with this incredibly evocative phrase, velvet like twilight, satin that caught light the way memory catches breath. Just beautiful, right? And it ends up revealing some pretty uncomfortable truths about, well, who gets to be a creator, especially now in the digital age. So, that description. It was the starting point for a queer autistic creator using the AI tool Sora. They designed this complex, really stunning dress, and the process they described was conversational, moving from this pure internal sensory feeling to a finished digital design, like translating something unseen. But here's where it kicks off. When they shared this creation, the reaction online was, well, it was swift and pretty harsh. Accusations started flying, cheating, lazy, it devalues real artistry.
Yeah.
You know the type. And the thing is, the criticism didn't seem to be about the actual design quality. It felt different, like gatekeeping.
Exactly, and that's why this deep dive feels so necessary, because as the sources we looked at really make clear, the panic wasn't really aesthetic. It wasn't about beauty. It was about legitimacy, It felt like a challenge to what one source calls the audacity of access. Who dares to access creativity this way? So our mission today is to analyze why. Why does the dominant culture, let's say, often panic when a marginalized person finds a tool that gives them real autonomy? The core conflict, according to these texts, boils down to this. What actually happens when an act of creation breaks that unspoken rule? The rule that says autonomy, for some people, has to stay conditional.
That phrase, conditional autonomy, wow, that feels like the key right there. It suggests the fight isn't really about the AI, is it? It's about who's allowed to skip the approved methods of struggle and effort.
That's exactly right. And the source material draws a direct line from this backlash to a historical pattern. It's almost predictable. Every time a marginalized community finds a tool, any tool that extends their perception or their ability, the dominant power structure moves, often very quickly, to sort of reassert control. It's a defense mechanism.
Yeah, the sources mention some really potent examples. Things like deaf signers being told that language isn't really theirs unless it's spoken language, or wheelchair users being constantly framed as dependent when the chair is actually their tool for freedom, for mobility.
And, very relevant to this story, the way neurodivergent expression gets dismissed. Think about autistic writers using assistive tech. They constantly face accusations of ventriloquy, like someone else is doing the work, or they're somehow cheating the real effort involved.
The message is always the same, isn't it?
Yeah.
You did it wrong. You took a shortcut. You didn't suffer enough for it to count.
Mm-hmm.
So if the outrage isn't really about the tech, or even the effort, what's actually being defended? What's the core thing?
Control. Plain and simple. It's this deep-seated insistence that struggle itself, particularly a certain kind of struggle, is virtuous. It's like conformity and visible suffering become the entry fee for your work, or even your existence, to be seen as legitimate. What really seems to offend the gatekeepers, according to the analysis, isn't that people find their own ways on the margins. It's that they stop asking permission. They just claim the time and the space that the dominant way of doing things insists must be earned through approved, linear, observable effort.
That really sets the stage for the social conflict. Okay, so let's connect that demand for conformity to the actual tools people use to create. Because technology isn't neutral, right? It evolves with biases built in. Our creator remembers their early art process as translating the unseen into the visible without explanation. The machine felt like more of a partner then.
Yeah, and this is where you see the tools themselves becoming almost disciplinary. Think about how design software changed over time. Those early programs like VersaCAD, the sources describe them as feeling human in their awkwardness. I like that. They allowed for happy accidents, serendipity. They were more like a companion in the process of discovery, almost like a digital sketchbook.
But then the industry shifted.
Yeah.
It went from, conversation to compliance. Love how the source puts it. AutoCAD and Illustrator arrived like a bureaucrat. Suddenly, it's all about grids, tolerances, constraints. Design wasn't sensing anymore. It became about solving, like moving from a studio to an accounting office.
The grid replaces the gesture. And this wasn't just a tech upgrade, It was framed in one source as kind of colonization of imagination itself. Spontaneity starts getting redefined as error. The machine isn't just helping organize, it's disciplining the designer. It's forcing intuition into narrow boxes.
So the tool itself starts shaping the mind, forcing it down a certain path. We're trained to think that kind of precision is the goal, the only valid way.
Precisely. And if you look at the theory around this, you see echoes everywhere. It's about turning fluid expression into data that can be managed, governed, a kind of bureaucratic capture. But The crucial point, especially for our creator, is that as these tools got more advanced, they increasingly demanded that sequential, linear, procedural thinking, and that inherently marginalized or even alienated minds that don't naturally work that way, non-analytic minds.
It really does sound like a factory model being applied to creativity, to the brain itself.
In essence, yeah. You could even bring in someone like Donna Haraway here, thinking about cyborgs. These new tools created these human-machine hybrids, sure, but they were hybrids designed for the factory floor, right? For efficiency, optimization, not really for the messy, unpredictable forest where discovery happens. The tool demanded the mind conform to its structure, not the other way around.
Which brings us right to that core friction, the difference in cognitive styles. It explains so much about why those bureaucratic tools felt so wrong to some people. So, on one side, you've got the analytic frame. That's the dominant mode, right? Where creativity means problem solving. Imagination is expected to unfold step by step, beginning, middle, end. And you show mastery by repeating things correctly, by conforming to the established process.
And then contrasted with that, you have the gestalt frame. This is often seen in neurodivergent thinking, like autism. The sources describe this kind of imagination as erupting in constellations. It's sensory first, language comes later, it's immersive, it jumps around, it circles back. You don't necessarily start at step one, you might inhabit the whole idea, the whole sensory world of it all at once.
That's a great way to put it. Like if the analytic mind builds with Lego, following the instructions, the gestalt mind sees the finished castle, feels the cold stone, hears the echoes instantly.
That's a fantastic analogy. Because for the gestalt thinker, mastery isn't about following steps perfectly. It's about resonance. It's that deep, sometimes sudden feeling when the internal pattern just clicks into place and everything sings. It feels right, coherent.
And there's actual academic work on this, supporting this idea.
Oh, yes. We looked at Denomi and D'Angiuli's work, their vivid representation framework. And what they argue, if I'm getting this right, is that autistic imagination isn't missing or deficient. It's just operating on a different timeline. It's out of sync with those expected linear rhythms.
So the deficits people talk about are maybe temporal, about timing and sequence, not ontological, not about a fundamental lack of imagination itself.
Exactly that. They describe it as often being a heightened sensory field, almost like an internal high-def experience where texture, sound, image, feeling, it's all fused together in cognition. It's an abundance of perception, really. But analytic frameworks, which demand things arrive neatly, sequentially, they just struggle to process that. It looks like noise to them.
So the mind's working differently, maybe even more intensely, just not tidally.
Right. Different frequency, not a broken receiver.
Okay. So then, when this creator encountered Sora, it felt like coming home. It bypassed that gridded tyranny, as they put it. It felt less command than conversation, a return to that earlier feeling, that gestural rhythm that got lost when software demanded obedience.
And the real gift of Sora, particularly for a gestalt mind, seems to be about time. Radical deceleration, almost. Sora allows for what the creator calls autistic temporality, this sort of circular unfolding rather than a forced march towards a finish line. They can dwell inside the design, tweak the pattern, explore the feeling of it, without being penalized for not being linear or fast enough.
The source calls this slowness an act of reclamation, which is powerful. In a world obsessed with speed and output, the machine is praised because it waits. The creator actually said, Sora isn't my master, it's the first one that doesn't rush me.
We should pause here, though, because it's complicated, isn't it? Sora is an AI. And we know AI comes with its own set of issues: corporate control, data concerns, exploitation. So is it just trading one kind of master the rigid software grid for another, potentially more insidious one, the corporation behind the AI?
That's the essential critical question. Absolutely. And the source material tackles this head on. It makes the point that art, well, it's pretty much always made within messy contradictions. Think about the camera once condemned, now a vital tool for marginalized voices. The argument isn't about finding pure tools. It's about positionality. Who is using the tool and why? To what end?
Right. So for a gestalt mind, this specific tool, despite its baggage, seems to be opening up something crucial that the analytic world had effectively closed off, which is the sheer time needed to process and translate that rich internal reality into an external form. It flips a potential instrument of control into a personal tool for liberation.
But that personal liberation can still crash right into the biases embedded in our wider systems, even the new tech ones. Which brings us to that experiment the creator ran. They asked an AI consensus GPT about research on autistic people using technology. And the result? It immediately defaulted to the deficit model. All the suggestions were about treatment, therapy, pathology, not creativity, not curiosity, not collaboration.
Yes, and this perfectly illustrates what the source calls the epistemic wound. It's a two-step process of power. First, power misnames you. It labels you deficit or disordered, not
Okay.
just different. Then it points to that very label, that misnaming, as objective evidence that its assessment was correct all along. The system validates itself by citing its own biases.
And the machines just inherit this.
They inherit their master's blindness, yes. An AI trained predominantly on data that reflects this deficit view will inevitably reproduce those distortions. It becomes, as the source says, a mirror of the power structure, polite, efficient, and profoundly incurious.
The language model just reflects the world it learned from. And consensus in that context,
Yeah.
it just means the dominant story swallowing other experiences whole. Control again.
Precisely. Consensus becomes another word for control.
So the dress.
Yeah.
That beautiful, complex dress.
Yeah.
It becomes way more than just an object. It's like a statement, an act of defiance against that control. It's the autistic mind insisting on its own language. Gestalt is grammar, coherence is breath, using the tools available.
It was absolutely an act of successful translation. It showed the neurodivergent mind as capable of elegance, complexity, deliberation. It defied that cultural script that wants to keep people as data points needing to be fixed, rather than as designers demanding their own space, their own time, their own autonomy. The goal, as the source beautifully puts it, was taking the tools of empire, these machines built for order and control, and turning them towards self-creation, towards revealing a coherence you were never trained to see.
Okay, wow. So let's just recap the journey here. We started with a backlash against a digital dress made with AI, and we ended up deep in the weeds of cognitive styles, the history of design tools, systemic bias, and this fundamental conflict between analytic control and gestalt liberation. The real fight, it seems, isn't really about the algorithms at all. It's about defending the very act of making worlds, of imagining differently from systems that demand conformity.
Couldn't have said it better. It all circles back to perception, doesn't it? The source uses that great Mark Twain quote, "You can't depend on your eyes when your imagination is out of focus." And maybe that's the final thought to leave you with. What if the issue isn't that the autistic imagination, or any marginalized imagination, is out of focus? What if the real problem is that the dominant culture just refuses to adjust its lens, refuses to see different kinds of focus? What if focus isn't always about sharp convergence on a single point? What if sometimes true focus is about deep, wide, radical immersion in the whole sensory field? Maybe the task isn't to fix or sharpen the marginalized mind to fit the existing frame. Maybe the real work is learning to see differently ourselves, to finally understand that imagination isn't some kind of moral hierarchy based on method. The courage is in perceiving differently, and then, despite everything, daring to call that difference beautiful.